Hello, listener. This is Nick Knoth with a special message before we get into the show. I want to let you know that unfortunately, the first 8 minutes or so of this episode have poor audio quality. Somebody, me, messed up the audio settings when starting the show, and that was not discovered until 8 minutes in, thereabout. So we apologize for that. If you can find a way to suffer through those first 8 minutes or so, or skip that if you must, the rest of the show is A-OK. We appreciate your understanding, and again, apologize for that inconvenience. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Good morning and welcome to the Como Vanguard podcast. This is the companion show to the written publication. You can find all things Como Vanguard at comovanguard.com. I am your host, Nick Kenneth, and as always, I am joined by Dan.
I'm doing well. This has kind of been an interesting week, has it not, Nick? I know that we both tried to follow the city council meeting Monday night, and that went into Tuesday morning, and then a little bit later on Tuesday morning.
That's right. We'll get into that with today's guest. We are joined by Ward 6 Councilwoman Betsy Peters. Betsy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this on another morning.
Yes. We had originally scheduled with Betsy to sit down with her Tuesday morning at, I believe we said 9 a.m. And then council went until almost 1:30 that morning, recess, and coincidentally recessed to 9 a.m. So that would have made it a little difficult for us to host this show with her. But we're here now, and we'll be talking about the council meeting that occurred Monday night/Tuesday, and as well as the public safety tax results and its passage. So with that, we'll go ahead and dive into the meeting. Actually, let me back up before diving in, getting ahead of myself. Betsy, would you share with our listeners your background in terms of how long you've been on council and who is Betsy Peters?
Well, thanks, Nick. I was born here. I was raised in Columbia. I did leave for 25 years. I got my medical degree here at the University of Missouri, and then I left for 25 years. And then I came back because I like Columbia. And, sort of looking around, I was in Dallas, Texas, and Dallas is a lovely city, but huge. And it doesn't have the ebb and flow of Columbia, and it doesn't have four seasons, and it doesn't have family. So I came back for all of those reasons. And I'm always excited to see the students come, and always happy when they go home at Christmas, and always happy when they come back in January. So I like that ebb and flow. They just add a real excitement to the city that we wouldn't have otherwise. I was elected to council in 2015, which means if you add that up, I've been on council for 11 years. I'm on my third city manager and my third mayor. It's been a lot of fun most of the time. I do have to say after midnight, it's not so much fun. So Monday night was a bit annoying, but generally speaking, I like the people I work with, and I think Columbia is a good place to live, and hopefully I represent the Sixth Ward well and add some perspective, if nothing else, some gravitas to the, white hair and years on the council.
Well, you are by far the longest serving member of our city council,
Yes.
which is quite young. That's 10 years we discussed on the show. You are, I think we discussed, right, Mayor Barbara Buffalo is the second longest serving member
Yes,
after
she is
you,
now.
and that isn't saying too much because she's in her
Fourth year. Just
fourth
starting her
year.
fifth year, I think.
Yeah, starting her fifth year, and so you're more than double that in terms of council. How time flies when you're having fun.
Yes, exactly.
What I
Every
thought
night.
also is if you add up the years of everybody else, maybe kick out the mayor, but add up the other 5 council persons, you would still have more years than them combined, would you not?
Thank you, David.
Hey,
I'm happy to hear that.
I am happy to hear that because I like having somebody on there like that. And I've said this before on other programs. I like that. I have gray hair also.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate seeing somebody else on the council on council nights that has gray hair. So
Well, thanks.
I'm curious, someone who's in that role, and you've seen what do you see your role as, not only in terms of being a city council member, but unique to your role of being the most experienced council member. How do you try to, bring your knowledge to be helpful? What does that mean to you?
I think I haven't done a great job, but I'm working on it. Sort of being a sounding board for some of the younger council people that are, they, as I think it was Mike Trapp said, the worst part about being on city council is disappointing people. People want you to do this or want you to do that. And some of your votes, they're not happy with it, whether it's the Gans Creek stuff or the new apartment building over on University and College. And so that's the most difficult thing, is that you can't please everybody all the time. So, it's helpful just to talk to folks on the council if they've got time, which most of them don't, but, just to sort of say, well, why don't you try and do it this way? Or why don't you ask this? Or maybe this doesn't need to be a public comment at a meeting. Maybe you'll get more information if you just ask the staff and then come back with a plan, kind of thing. So, it's that kind of stuff. Just watching them sort of get into the role.
Well, we're talking about longevity. I'm curious as to your opinion and your reaction to those who say prior city councils did not act when they should have, and that's why we get into the position we are. Now, I know some of the comments, especially in regard to Proposition 1, were saying we should have done this 30 years ago. Well, you weren't on the council 30 years ago, but you were on the council a decade ago. So for those who say, previous councils drug their feet on some very tough decisions, your reaction to that?
That would be correct. But you have to have 4 people on council that are agreeable to putting this on the ballot. You have to have, chiefs, and we have had chiefs that could go out and speak to the public, but you need a plan. You need a city manager who doesn't say, well, we'll just keep cutting the budget. So you need all of those people to say, we're willing to go out and stand up and say, well, maybe we should have done this 30 years ago, but we weren't here. Or, you can't really see into the future. And nobody wants to raise taxes. I mean, that was, Barbara's first sentence, I think, every time she spoke about this to groups was, okay, no politician wants to come and say, you guys want a tax increase. I mean, look at the state propositions. Let's get rid of taxes. We can't do that and then have public safety. But it's both a hard sell by the fact that it just barely passed, and it's hard to ask for. I mean, nobody's got extra money laying around. So, we needed a whole council that's agreeable to it. We need, chiefs that are capable of doing it. We need a city manager that's got and the finance director that have a plan. We need the unions behind it. So it takes a lot to get it organized.
In addition to that, I was also thinking like transmission lines or other issues that again have been kicked down the road.
Yeah, and I was one of the I was that was a 4-3 vote to delay that. But so this is what I'll also counsel people on the council about is you be careful because was anticipating a 6-month or 1-year delay. Well, we sort of got more information. I was not anticipating a 10 to 11 year, however long it's been, delay. So, and that's a big mess. And I think we have a council that will vote to move that forward after the information meetings, which I think there's one on the 11th of August, if I'm correct. But I don't know that for sure. And as we change council so quickly, it's hard for people to have any longevity.
But it does take people, and you responded to this earlier, who are willing to risk, and they have to risk their future as council members or mayors. And I thought one of the comments that was made, I watched yesterday's press conference with the police and fire chief and the mayor and the city manager reacting to the vote on Proposition 1. And I thought one of the comments that struck me, and you can use this with many things, not just with Proposition 1, is that years down the road, future council people, future mayors, future city managers, future chiefs will say thank you for doing what you did. Although that does not mean that people won't have to pay the price now. And I don't mean, I'm talking about the elected officials or hired officials paying the price now.
But, at the same time, I mean, if you're trying to get elected because you want to be elected, I have to wonder about that. I mean, I certainly do enjoy this job, and I certainly hope, whenever if I run again, which I'm at the moment planning to, that I'm successful. But at the same time, I'm willing to represent the 6th Ward. If the 6th Ward wants somebody else to represent them, then they should vote for someone else, and they can do that. I mean, I've had people run against me, and that's fine. I mean, and if you're not on the council, then you're not on the council. I mean, to me, this is local, and you need to represent your ward. And if your ward doesn't like you, then get rid of you.
Where does the desire come to keep on wanting to represent that ward and wanting to be on the council, regardless of the fact that you were there until 1:30 on Monday morning or Tuesday morning, then came back 8 hours later to start again?
I think just providing some foil or just a different perspective. I think our council is, fairly young and they want to help people, which is great, but we still need to pay the bills. Because I remember having this, it was like, well, wait, we have our utility fund that, helps people that can't afford bills, but then we're going to raise rates. And I'm like, well, those are two separate things. We need to pay the bills. And I think that gets lost sometimes. We need to pay the bills and we need to keep the infrastructure. If we have a full service city, we need to keep our electrical grid up and running. We need our water to work. It's like the sewers need. We have all of those things. And sometimes we get those confabulated with, oh, well, some people can't pay their bills. Yeah, I know that. And that's too bad. But we have to pay our bills. So, it's helpful to have, I think, that perspective.
It's very much like you said with the public safety tax, similar subject, right? Where it's the nice to have versus the must haves.
Yeah.
And city utilities and the services it provides are must-haves.
Hmm.
That is a requirement that the city has to provide because it owns its own utility, provides utility services.
Right.
The utility assistance program is, as much as I love it and I support it, and I think everyone does, it's a nice to have.
Yeah.
The city doesn't have to have that to function.
Right.
And that's just that's the situation that
Yeah.
exists. That's just how
Yeah.
we are.
And I think that's the difference between being the city and being a social service agency.
Right.
We can do as much as we can, but we do need to run the city as a business.
I want to go back to what Nick brought up first, and then we've kind of gone from that. But he was talking about the introduction of the budget. I just like to ask your opinion as someone who has gone through the process several years. So I went on to the presentation, and the presentation made at the council meeting is different than the budget, which is also attached to the
Mhm.
city material. So I went on just to see what the budget looked like. So it's like 231 pages before you get to the additional information at the end. So my question is, that's overwhelming for me, a regular citizen. I'd like two parts. One, how do you examine the budget? But how do you talk to other people to say, here's the best way to try to get an idea rather than to think you have to go through every page?
I think it's pick the fund that you want some information about and go to that section. I think I haven't counted it lately, but the last time I was told it was 52 different budgets within the city budget. So someone said, "Oh well, no, nobody can really understand that unless you're in the city." And I'm like, "That's crap. We all have budgets. Yes, we can. It's just that there's 52 of them. So you can you can go to the part that you're interested in, whether it's usually for me, it's the water and electric and the what are called the enterprise funds. How is that working? What are we keeping for projects that we want to do? What's the 20% that we need to keep to make sure that we can pay our bills? And then you can move on to the different budgets, the general fund budget or whatever budget you're interested in. So it's easier if you can do it in per budget versus I used to try and start at the beginning of the budget and read it. And that doesn't really work that well. You're better off doing it in parts. And yeah, I mean, the presentation is certainly not 231 pages.
Mhm.
It has to be more of an overview. But we already had 3 different 2-hour budget meetings, and we've already talked in January, every January we talk about what the priorities are for the city and, talk to the finance director. So this isn't like the first time we've seen it. We just keep working on it.
Well, speaking of the budget, we'll go
Yeah.
ahead and dive into it. So it was introduced last night, and as I said a little earlier in the show, right, flat revenue growth, relatively speaking,
Uh-huh.
big subjects that were discussed were the utility systems, as we kind of already touched on, community media funding, which has been nothing new for the past year, and I don't feel the need to discuss it at all, frankly. And then transit funding also came up as a subject around the bus fares. What is your thought on the public transit system right now in terms of bus fares itself is a question, but to me, that question is a symptom of the larger concern, which is the city of Columbia just deciding, are we going to have a robust public transit system or not?
Well, that's the question. We got a report from a consultant about a 30-year plan to introduce, to improve the system and keep improving the system and keep improving the system. And it was a 30-year plan, which is, I mean, there's no 30-year plan that I know is going to actually go anywhere. I think, and having just passed the public safety tax, I'm in no position to discuss any other taxes or any other funding for transit. But I think if we're going to do it, we need to do it. I don't know that we will because I don't know that there's the will to do that. But my feeling is we need to get if we're going to do it, we need a transit system that actually works, that actually gets you somewhere. Because this sort of like, well, we'll go from 45 minutes for a route to 20 minutes for a route. It's the same routes. They're not very efficient. I can go stand there and then I get to drive. I get to be driven all over downtown Columbia before I get wherever I'm going. I haven't ridden the bus in years, but the last time I did, I got on at Boone Hospital. I got off at Paquin Tower because then they had to go like, I don't know, south somewhere and all over, and I could walk the 10 blocks. So I think we really, if we want to do this, we really need to commit to it. I don't know that we have the funding to commit to it. And I don't know that, to do fares, we have to put in fare boxes, which are expensive apparently. And then if we don't have more, I mean, I don't really want another consultant, but I think maybe we do need a task force. But one of the real questions is, are we going to have public transportation in this city or not? And people talk about how, well, we get all of our buses from federal money, but we still have to put some money into it. And if it's really not working, having said that, I don't know what people that really need to take a bus are going to do. So I don't know how to fix this problem at all.
Yeah.
Pretty
So
much just my answer, but I don't,
I think that's a
you know.
fair answer. It's a complicated issue that has a lot of variables to it. Everything from,
Mhm.
like you said, like it's one thing to have all the federal money coming in that helps subsidize a lot of the capital investments,
Right,
but it doesn't do anything in terms of the staffing or the actual day-to-day operations.
right,
And that is balanced right now, or not balanced rather, right, by the city has not charged a bus fare since COVID hit.
right.
That is going to continue through FY
Mhm.
27 in this current budget as proposed. But as Shane Creech, Director of Public Works, and frankly all of council acknowledge, for the most part, that is not sustainable if you want transit to improve,
Right.
because you got to fund it.
Yeah,
If you want a
right.
nicer product, you want a nicer service,
Uh,
you got to pay for it.
and I'm not sure where when you look at Gainesville, Florida, or some of their, there are some college towns that actually have pretty good transportation systems, but they're funded by the city and by the university, and I expect by the private partners that have the shuttles that are running up to the university from the apartment complexes south of town. So you really need like a whole transportation authority or something like that. Not can we all get along, because we apparently don't all get along that well, or we're not willing to fund it that well. So, and we've looked at other systems, we just haven't, and maybe we can't be all things to all people. I don't know. We're sort
Well,
of car centric, sadly.
I suspect, to your point, if a dedicated tax question is one of the options for that, I don't suspect that council or staff are in a hurry to put that to the voters,
No,
given that the public safety tax just happened, right? So no one's going to be rushing through that
right.
door again anytime soon. It's a different subject if citizens self-organize and try to bring something like that. That's a whole different
Yeah,
scenario. And frankly, for PTAC, for the Public Transit Advisory Commission, and all the folks who feel strongly about it, that's probably a more successful pathway, relatively speaking.
yeah. Well, we've seen some of that, like the first last mile folks, and I mean, and there are some. I mean, there are some small groups that have gotten organized. I don't have a good answer for that at all, and I sit through all the consultant reports, and I just think this is sadly it's all about money. I mean, after 11 years on the council, I'm like, well, it's the same thing with affordable housing. If we had the money, we could do that, but it's taxpayer money. We're not the social services for the entire city. Sometimes people might feel we are, but we're not. And the budget, people are like, well, it's not balanced, but it's as balanced as we're going to get it, pretty much, because I mean, this is projected, and that's why, like every quarter, then we get an update as to where the budget is. This is what we think is going to come in. This is what we think it's going to cost, and that's why you run into the economic things where that extra $1 million that we had to spend for electricity a couple years ago was sort of like, whoa, you
I
know.
think you had the reserves.
Exactly, and
Right.
that's why we have the reserves, because we need to be financially sound.
Well, and that's and I say that because I know folks always, not always, but there's a segment of the population that attacks how high the city maintains some of its cash reserves,
Mhm.
whether it's a general fund or some of the various utilities. But it's because, as you just demonstrated, when one thing happens, it is not a, oh, we need $50,000. It's
Yeah.
a, we need $2 million for this power purchase agreement,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
we need this for, whatever it might be, whether
Yeah.
it's utilities or public safety, and things have 3, 4, 5x in costs. And so while you might have $20 million in a reserve fund, one problem can knock half of that out,
Yeah.
and that's not exaggeration.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
a transformer, if you need one in an emergency, you're going to be paying an incredible amount of money for it.
Exactly right. So,
Well, speaking of everything costing more,
Mhm.
yeah.
as
Yes.
as we noted in our report, part of this budget process has begun, as happens every year, are the various departments and funds with their own fees and rates and permitting
Yep.
coming to council and saying, "Hey, here are the things we need to increase to essentially balance our budget
Mhm.
and to maintain the service we provide and to be able to, whether it's staff or vehicles or systems, whatever it might be." And boy, was the Monday night council meeting full of that.
Yes, it was, and it would really be nice if we could maybe spread that out over a couple of council meetings. I don't know if it would be better or worse, but certainly, Monday night's council meeting was very long on, we need to raise rates for this and that and whatever.
Well, and I'll just rattle this off for listeners. The things that were impacted: public health fees, park fees, electric rates, water rates, solid waste rates, development fees, and special event permit fees. The one thing that didn't go forward that night, that got it's coming is parking garage rate increases just because it needs to go to the relevant commission is what council decided for their review. And coming down the line as well, sewer rates, because that's impacted by state law in terms of advertising that for public input. So again, everything.
Yes. Yes.
And that is a hard pill to swallow for anyone. I know council, as we discussed with public safety tax, council doesn't want
No.
to increase anything. It'd be nice. I look forward to the day, if it ever happens, where council has the ability to be like, you know what, we're cutting. We're gonna cut the rate on something. I, I don't know if
Okay.
that will happen in my
I
lifetime.
was gonna say I'd like to see that myself, but we'll see.
And well, you know, I say that, I take that back. It did happen because water rates went down for some folks just a
Uh-huh.
couple years ago.
Yeah.
And even with this increase, the water rates are still less than they were for the
Mhm.
average water
Yeah.
utility customer
Right.
than they were a couple years ago. So already, I just corrected myself there. It has occurred.
Eh yeah, it has
It's
occurred,
the
but I don't know.
exception. It's the
Yeah.
nobody. I say that nobody feels that, but technically it's
Yeah.
occurred.
Yeah.
And but how do you feel about that as a council member? Again, leaning on the fact that you've the longest serving council member. A lot of these things, as David has already mentioned, are the result of previous councils and city managers and management not being willing, or kind of as you said, right, like the plans didn't align where there was a willingness to do what was necessary.
Right.
Now it's happening. It has
Right.
been happening for the last couple of years, frankly.
Right.
What does that mean to you in terms of actually seeing these
Um,
things happen? And when you have your Ward 6 constituents in general come to you and say, Betsy, you're killing me, right? What's your response to
I'm sorry.
that?
And I am sorry, but I mean, we need to pay the bills too. And it's like, when you flip the light switch on, you do expect to get light. You don't expect to have to say, well, I will in 20 minutes, or, whenever somebody else finishes their dry, when their dryer turns off or whatever, like we do expect to have the services. Some of these rates have not been increased since 2019. Some of them have been, raised more often. And I do remember sitting through councils where people really were unwilling to raise rates because it will affect our lowest income folks. And all I can say is that's why we have the utility assistance program, because we still need to pay it. And I don't know how you're ever going to say, well, you can afford more and they can afford less, so we're going to charge you different amounts for the same service. I don't think that that's fair either. So you're just sort of stuck. I don't know. I don't know.
I think that one question I have for you is in regard to comparison, and I understand what I'm about to say doesn't ease the cost of those here in Columbia, but oftentimes in presentations, staff will show charts that show Columbia compared to other cities, either
Mhm.
in Missouri or elsewhere. And regularly, we are on the lower end of what it costs to provide these services. So, my question, I guess, is you trust those comparisons, and I know it doesn't ease the pain of seeing increased rates, but I get the idea that we kind of live in a pretty good community that is pretty economical compared to others.
I think so. Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, when they show those, the comparison slides to other cities in Missouri, and we're usually on 50%. I won't say less, but on that list, we are on the lower end, as you say.
Yeah.
And even when we raise things, because someone said that to me about the public safety tax. Well, we've got the highest taxes in Missouri now. The highest sales taxes. I'm like, actually, we don't. Well, it seems like we do. Well, and it might seem like we do, but we don't. So yeah, it is helpful to have seen those. I think it's also helpful to have professionals. Because we did have consultants come in and look at our electric and water. The American Public Power Association, I think, are the folks that do that, and they look at these rates in relationship to other public, municipal public utilities, and they're the ones who are recommending what we do and how we reorganize the rates a bit so that some of the rates go down and some of the rates go up. And as Aaron Keyes, the utility director, pointed out, these are rates that we can justify. We can look back and not say, well, we just sort of felt that, we didn't really want to raise the rates this year because, or well, we were going to raise these rates more. There is actual some, if not science, some logic as to what the recommendations are and what the best practices are. So, I find that somewhat comforting because it's not just, I mean, I love the water and light board, and I try and make all their meetings if I can. But, we're all civilians, if you want to say that. We're not really, actually, a lot of these guys are on the, in the industry, but to have somebody actually look at our rates and say, well, you're overcharging here and you're undercharging here, and this is not, the best practice these days. This is what we're doing, and this will allow you to put new water mains in when you need them when they break in the summer, and this will allow you to make sure that you've got clean water. It's helpful to have professionals do that and then follow their recommendations.
Nick went through the long list of what rate increases or what increases there were on fees in a
Hmm.
whole lot of different departments. Were you surprised as I watched that? I thought there would be more public comment on some of those, but I thought that overall that list was handled pretty quickly.
Yeah, it was. And you're right. We had a couple of big customers from up on Paris Road who were commenting, I
Mhm.
think, on the electric rates, if I remember
Mhm.
correctly. And it is, or maybe water, but I think electric. Well, whatever. That this was a huge rate increase. And although we went ahead and passed those rates, I think the information was so loud and clear that we aren't doing as good a job in explaining this to our large customers. And we talked to Paul from Ready was there, and Aaron Keys, the utility director, obviously, and Christopher Ave, the new communications guy. So hopefully we can make sure that we let them know because they're big issues where this is a big jump for them and they need to plan. And it's like, well, with our consultants, if we keep going with them, I mean, their recommendations are what we should be doing for the next 4 or 5 years. So we should be able to tell them this is, you can expect a 2% increase next year so that they can plan properly. So I feel like we did learn again from them that we need to improve the information we give them.
But again, I thought overall
Hmm.
there weren't many comments from the
No,
public.
no, they were not. I don't sort of surprised at that because there have
Could have
been
been a
other
lot longer
years.
meeting if
Oh,
we thought.
thanks, David. You're right, actually, though. We didn't hear a lot. I don't know if everybody's just tired, from the state and the political and the national political stuff, or if they don't think it's that terrible. I don't know.
Well, and I'm sure part of it was the later it got, the less people are gonna be at City Hall.
Well, except the folks that wanted more changes to that apartment building
Yes.
at University and
Yes,
College, they stuck around, and
they
that was
did
like
show up.
midnight or thereabouts. I was
Yeah.
pretty impressed that they were still there.
Well, let's talk about that just a little bit. I don't see it as that big of a subject, but as you noted, it was certainly heavily discussed. People showed up. Predictably, it's impacting not only downtown-ish, downtown university,
Yeah.
border, but of course your neck of the woods, your favorite group, the East Campus Neighborhood
Yeah,
Association.
right. Right.
Always passionate about anything that happens ever. And they had some requests. So what's happening in this proposal, this development that came forward was taking the property located at University and College Avenue
Yeah.
on on the north side of it.
Northwest corner.
Yes, on the
Yes.
northwest corner. Thank you. And essentially redeveloping it into a
Yeah.
large student housing complex with its own underground parking and being, a few stories tall. Certainly very different than what's there now. Although serving the same purpose, just to a significantly higher degree. And folks came in, they were concerned about, is there enough parking? Architectural design choices, pedestrian safety concerns with the sidewalks and its impact on traffic with College Avenue, etc. Ultimately, council did vote to move it forward after significant discussion. I'm confident that was over an hour of discussion, probably just shy of 2 hours. What was it's bordering on your folks. I know you had a lot of comments on it as well. What was the top of your mind?
Well, parking, of course, but they do have parking there, which is different than, I mean, I think one of the concerns for both Benton Stevenson and East Campus is that Brookside Apartments, when they first went in over on Walnut and College, they had no parking because, of course, their students were not going to bring cars. And so they just completely flooded Benton Stevens, and it was a big mess until they built their parking garage. These developers came in with parking already in place. Whether it's as much parking as they need is always questionable, and I don't know. But there is a fair amount of parking there, so hopefully that will work out. I wish I'd brought up, I think the Todd, which is on the other side of campus, I think they actually have cars for rent. Or they were supposed to. So, like, you could fill out like a rental application and have a credit card and insurance, whatever, and then just go and get a car when you needed it for an hour or 2 hours to run errands and not actually have a car. I don't know whether they're still doing that or not, but it sounded like a great idea that I don't know who does those, whether it's Sixth or Avis or Hertz or whatever, but something where, because really we store our cars most of the time. How often do we really use them? Anyway, there was that. I know the mayor wanted a wider sidewalks for pedestrians and for biking, I think, along College. The neighbors were very, and I think appropriately, concerned about that corner. That's one of the most dangerous corners for pedestrians, College and University. And our staff had already talked to MoDOT about that, and MoDOT has that on their list of improved intersections. They talked about a right turn and left turn, protected left turn, and maybe a protected pedestrian crossing. The college kids will stand there and they're really sweet. But if they push that button in, even if all the traffic's going the same way they are, if it says wait, they'll wait. And I'm like, you can tell these folks are not have not been walkers. It's another thing they can learn when they're at the university is how to get across. I mean, it sounds funny, but I mean, I've got nephews and nieces who didn't know how to do that either. I'm like, let's look, this is when it's safe. This is what you look for, So MoDOT is planning to improve that area. We do have wider sidewalks now. There was a 10% green space they wanted. The interesting thing is, the planning and the community development folks are saying, well, it's like downtown. And we're like, it's not like downtown. You can make it sound like that, but we need a little more greenery than that. We need, it shouldn't be concrete right up to the building. So there's a little bit more green space than was there. We talked about they've got an exit coming out onto College.
That's the part that I have the most problem with. And to say that you can make a left turn out of there easily
Safely.
is not true.
Exactly.
And I understand they were showing how many access points there are now to College and what exists, but it's not the same. It is not going to be the same.
It is not the same because those are small parking lots, surface parking lots. I totally agree. But at some point, I'm like, well, these are the experts. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, whenever we were doing this. And I'm just like, are you guys really, I mean, this seems crazy to me. And I think they'll have to change it. I mean, I think that will be an exit, but it's going to be a right in, right out. I think they're going to have to do that. So if you want to get out, you really need to go out on Matthews and then go left and then go left on University, and then you can get to College. But I mean, these are the design professionals too. And then these are the traffic folks, and MoDOT seems to think it's not a problem. So I don't know who it is that never stands at, I mean, I couldn't turn left today on College. I had to go right because too much traffic. I don't know how they think this is going to work, but
I thought the conversation about sidewalks was way too long. And, even to the point of saying a 12-foot concrete sidewalk, which was requested by one of the council members, and eventually it went down a few feet from that. But it was like, holy cow, there's no need for that there.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand that, why that was so, but it was quite important to the mayor, I know. And I don't know what the deal was, but it's also midnight. So by then I'm like,
it's interesting though, because I liked the conversation. I think it's a really cool development because it is, as somebody I think referenced it as like campus housing because it's so close to the campus. And if you've been to other communities that are similar, I mean, building these kinds of things works at a lot of college towns and it makes sense. So I think it's going to make good sense at this particular spot.
And I think we'll see how it goes. I mean, part of it is people talk about how there's a decreased college age population.
True.
So I'm not sure. I know the university's trying not to do any more residence halls, and they're actually getting rid of residence halls. But I don't know at what point we're not going to have this many students. But
and the other thing, I think students or maybe young people now, maybe, and I don't know, I'd like to see this studied more or hear the studies of this, are not as dependent on cars in some situations and are not so enamored with the fact that I have to have a car at my disposal all the time. And maybe some students will come from places where they're not going to bring cars.
Well, and that people now have personal scooters. So we don't have Bird scooters or Lime scooters around here, but I see an awful lot of people zipping around on these little scooters and the electric bikes that really don't require you to bike at all. I love that when I watch them go uphill, and I'm thinking, isn't that a bike?
No,
It's apparently sort of a bike scooter combination. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, and you could be right. And I've certainly seen the kids before coming back with their case of beer that they're sitting on their scooter as they come back. And I'm thinking, well, I guess that works. And I just have to admire the ingenuity of the whole thing,
I just want to add, I went back and looked at it. So that discussion started about 11:30
Uh-huh.
p.m. Ended after the vote happened, 1:16 a.m.
Oh, wow. No wonder we quit. Yeah, see, I don't know how to make that stuff shorter, though,
but
if
then
there's
again,
any way to make it shorter, if it should be,
the developers had the developer, they had a lawyer, they had a owner,
Traffic engineer.
they had others. So they're like 5 representatives or so of the development. And I think also something that some of us who are not ever having been on the council or in the city staff, lots of work goes into this prior to the presentation there.
That's true.
And I think that they have communicated a lot with certain departments or workers in the city and already have done a lot. And I don't think that's appreciated sometimes by council members or by the public.
I think you're probably right. I mean, you're right. There's a staff It's already gone through planning and zoning for one thing. So they've already looked at it. But, the city has also looked at it. It's had to meet all the city requirements. They've had to come up with, it's a PD plan. So there are, they were asking for different zoning and whatnot. But you're right. There was a lot of that. And then, the engineer gets up, the developer gets up, and then, so there's a lot of discussion. I just wish it didn't start at 11:30.
Yeah, I will say that type of proposal in terms of that taking that long to discuss, that one seems appropriate to me.
Mm.
It's it's
Yeah.
it's making a big impact in a sensitive part of town. An hour and a half plus or hour 45 just about of discussion. That's not that crazy. Not in this town for a development.
Definitely
So
not in
that doesn't
something that
surprise me.
large. Yeah.
What's unfortunate, as you said, is timing in terms
Yeah.
of it started at 11:30 PM,
Yeah.
and so that part didn't end till 1:16, which is a great segue into the last council-related subject I have, which is, as we noted in our reporting, council meetings themselves became a subject of discussion at this meeting and have been a subject the last few months in terms of they're going long, they seem inefficient, they seem, perhaps ineffective to some degree. Nobody is happy when a council meeting goes till 1:30 in the morning, recesses, and then comes back at 9 a.m. the same day, and then spends another 2 hours discussing things. So council, in effect, with the break in there, had a 9 hour plus meeting.
Yeah, I don't think I'd count the break, but I know what you're
Oh, that's
saying.
not
It's a really long.
not
Oh, not
not
counting the
not
break.
counting the
Oh,
break.
yeah,
It was
that's true.
9 hours.
And we started at 6. I
Yeah.
mean, and
You s
we're starting the next meeting at 6 also,
Yeah.
with the expectation that it'll be a long meeting. Yeah, there's some discussion about moving the public comments to the first, my feeling is we do the introduction and first read, letting people know that we're going to discuss it at the next meeting. There is some discussion about how we should have the introduction, first read, and public hearing at that same meeting so that if there's comments or things that we need to change, we can address that and then come back in 2 weeks at the next council meeting with whatever changes we think would be appropriate. There is some discussion as to whether that could happen or if that would really help or not. I don't know. Does that mean we don't have public comment at the second one? We're not really good at saying, no, we're not going to let you comment. So I don't know that we're not going to just have public comment twice instead of once. I'm not sure. I like the idea that we're letting people know we're discussing it in 2 weeks versus you have to really scramble to know that or know that it's something of interest to you. I don't know if that's going to help or not.
How would you shorten the meetings if you had just an overall control of saying, this is what we're going to do to make this shorter?
I'm not really sure. I actually have a call into Vera and Christina, and I've discussed. I mean, we're discussing it sort of one-on-one. Just what do you think would work? I mean, you're sort of stuck in that. I mean, you want to certainly get the public input, and you want to make thoughtful decisions. Every once in a while, I'll just call the question, and that I know Monday night was like, what? But I have more things to say. It's like, and I know the mayor has done that very nicely, much nicer than I do since she runs the meetings where it's like, I'll take 2 more comments, then I'm going to call the question. I think some of that's that we just need to say everybody's had a chance to say something. If you really wanted to make an amendment, you should have said it when you had time. Maybe we just need to say everybody can only speak once. Maybe we're going to have to say 3 minutes or 5 minutes per council person and be done with it. I don't really know. It's certainly a decision the whole council needs to make. I'm not sure they're going to be willing to say, I'm going to restrict my comments to 3 minutes. I mean, I just don't know.
Politicians choosing to restrict the amount they can say.
Well, I mean, and you're talking to the wrong one,
Oh, I know. You're not.
I know. Well, and one of my constituents said to me one time, "Thank you so much for not speaking. Just vote."
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, well, maybe I should clone you a few times. But people, they want their constituents to know why they're thinking this or why they're voting this way or that way.
Here's an observation. What you talked about a while ago that took an hour and a half of comments was on the consent agenda originally, was it not?
It was, but it can get pulled by
I know
any
it
citizen.
can,
Yeah.
but that's interesting that they originally had it on the consent agenda where
Well,
it could have gone, you could have saved an hour and a half.
Well,
Which I don't know why it was on the consent agenda. It doesn't make sense to me that you would have put that originally on not you, but
yeah,
staff.
actually, and I was at some meeting where they were talking about that's actually the best practice is that you put everything on the consent agenda that you can,
That might work.
and then
Pull
it's
off.
pulled off if
Yeah.
you really want to discuss it versus guessing as to what people want off. So if it's sort of standard, if it's gone, especially like that particular development was 6-0 vote and approval for planning and zoning, that goes on consent unless somebody wants to discuss it. So, and I forget what meeting I was at, but it wasn't here. But anyway, that was the best practice, was to do that. So and I mean, I remember that email because Barbara specifically said to the citizen that emailed, "Do you want it off the consent agenda? Do you want us to pull it?" And he was like, "Yeah." So,
which makes sense.
yeah,
But
but
it's not on the consent agenda. It didn't make sense to me that it
Yeah.
was on the consent agenda at
Yeah.
one time.
well, just think how long we could go though
Yeah.
if everything was not, and
I agree.
and DeCarlin, I think used to, or maybe John Glasscock used to try and figure out what needed to be on what not. So, the current plan is it goes on consent, read the consent agenda. If you're unhappy with something or you want more information or you want to discuss it like they did, then pull it off.
So you have to look at what makes the meeting so long. Is it staff presentations? I would say no. As a general rule, it is not staff presentations. Is it citizen comments? Sometimes yes. Is it council members? And I think it's council members who make the meetings go long.
I think it is. I think they're also, most of them are pretty new. They have a lot of questions. Some of them I think they're able to ask staff beforehand. Some of them I've heard them say, well, the public wants to know this. You've already given me the answer, but they'll ask the question anyway because they want their constituents to know that. I'm not sure which ones, but anyway, somebody had
Interesting to
asked
put
it.
a clock on each council person to see how much time they spend in a meeting. And it also each question that they ask. You ask good, concise questions. I don't know how you've been trained to do that or where that comes from, other than the fact that you have experience and that you know what, it's best just to get to the point and ask the question.
Yeah.
I think there is training to be done in how to ask questions.
That's probably true. There's also maybe training on to how to make sure that you ask the questions before the council meeting if you
That
can.
too.
And I know we've gone to the agenda was coming out Wednesday. Now it's back to Thursday, which works better for the staff and doesn't really make any difference for us. But we need to look at it. We're supposed to get our questions in, I think by noon on Sunday, but it could be 5. I don't know. I can't remember. But every council person, if they've got questions, are supposed to actually email them to the city manager's office so that the staff can have answers to those questions, and either they'll email them back and someone in the city, Stacy Wiedemann in the city manager's office, organizes that and sends that out like by noon on Monday to try and get a lot of questions answered before the meeting, and also to let the staff know what questions might come up.
Yeah.
So, if constituents have asked us and we don't know, it gives us a chance to ask the staff, and it keeps us from having those gotcha moments with the staff, which we don't really want because the staff knows what they're talking about. But if they need to look something up, it's nice if they've looked it up so that in theory that makes the meeting more efficient. Okay, so it's not working exactly the way we want it to, but we are trying to get those questions, and I'm not sure really why the meetings go quite so long, except I agree it's mainly the council talking.
I'll just make one more comment. I understand also sometimes the desire as an elected representative to be responsive to the people who I represent, to say, I did bring this up. I did ask this question. My observation would be there are not many people watching the city council meeting. That's not an audience. I'd only do it to please Nick here because, and I'll tell you, and I've told him since January, I've watched more city council meetings than I ever had before. And there is a tedium to these that just would drive many citizens berserk.
That's correct.
So for those who feel like I have to ask this question in public, on record, so that I can say I asked this question, I understand that to a point, but what I think would be better, and what you just explained as far as asking questions outside of the council meeting, go ahead and do that, and then report to your ward.
Yeah.
I did this outside of the meeting.
And
You're
these are
not
the
going to hear
answers.
it in the recorded, which you're not going to listen to anyway, but I did this, and send it out in an email
Yeah.
or in a newsletter or something saying, these are issues that I brought up. Because I think more people in your ward would see that and respond
Yeah.
to it on their own time in a concise package.
And actually that's a really good thought. I really hadn't thought about that, but especially for people that have those specific questions. I'm not in control of the rest of the council, however.
I just gotta say, I always shake my head and chuckle anytime any council member says, "For the record," or "I want to read something." I'm like, "What record are we talking about? This isn't Congress. This isn't going into the Library of Congress." All right, no,
You never know.
it's me and David and like a dozen or 2 dozen other people watching these meetings.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the reminder to vote.
Yes.
But I don't think that you're gonna make too big of a wave there, letting people know about whatever, you
Yeah.
know. Anyways, I'll
Yeah. Yeah.
speaking of voting, the last thing we'll touch
I was
on.
going to say, we had a really good voter turnout, though, I think,
Yes.
for
Because of comments made at 10:30 on Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
hey,
Nobody would
I
nobody
mean,
would have voted if council members
oh
hadn't
my
said at 1:30
gosh.
AM on election day to go vote. I
Well,
digress.
they were in at the end of the meeting on Tuesday morning when they got to their general comments.
Oh, I
That's when
know.
they
I
were
mean, well,
doing it.
that's
It's
what
like
I mean. It's
the
like, well,
polls
I
have been
was.
open for 4
I know,
hours,
but
folks.
that's I mean, of my because I hardly say anything at the end of the meetings, and I was like, oh, Nick Foster's not here. I need to say, remember to go vote tomorrow if you haven't voted already. But yeah, it was sort of funny. But I was like, well, there's the rest of the day. Make sure you go get your sticker on and that you voted. Let us know what you think. So
Well, speaking of the election, the public safety tax happened. It passed seemingly. I don't think we've had like official
yeah,
results yet.
right.
The unofficial results, which are good enough for us, it passed by 85 votes, which we've
Yeah.
talked on this show, and I'm sure we've all agreed. I think everybody knew this was going to be a toss up. It was going to be a close race or close vote, no matter what. But that is beyond close. That is razor thin.
Yes, especially when you look at how many people voted, because wasn't it like
Almost
29,
it was like
30,000?
30,000
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, by 85 votes.
Yeah.
It should be for the
Which is
record book.
over 10% of the city of Columbia coming out to vote
Oh,
on
wow.
one item.
Well, they were probably voting on Prop 4 and 5 and
Right,
whatever
right.
else, I mean,
But
they were there for other things, but yeah.
So 30,000 people came out to vote, and they all only voted on that. Those votes did not make it down the ballot to the associate judge or to
Yeah.
the county auditor, right? They were there primarily, it appears, for the public safety tax, and it passed by 85 votes. I think, and I imagine that everyone feels the same. That speaks volumes about how contentious or divided people were on it in terms of just how they felt, and we certainly had those conversations on this show. I'm curious from you, Betsy, what does that result mean to you?
What means we can fund our fire and police officers. We can fund the pension plan. I'm very grateful that people came out and voted and that people voted for it. It is a very razor thin margin. I think the frustrating thing for me when I would read comments online or whatever was how many people did not trust the city council. And I remember something I think I read on Nextdoor that said, so if you don't like the chiefs, don't punish the Indians, meaning the police and fire, that we need to staff them and we're not. And they're like, well, they can just do a better job. It's like, do you know how much we've been cutting over the years because nobody wanted to go to the people and say, we're cutting and we need to fix this. We need to do this. So I'm very grateful for the people that voted for it. I know that when we voted to put it on the ballot, it was like, we want a yearly report just on this, how much money came in, what exactly has it been spent for. We need to be very both careful, responsible, and make sure that people know what we've spent that money on and that it's not being either frittered away or there's a big concern that it's going to be diluted or we're going to take money out of the general fund that used to go to the police. But if we're fully staffed, we need $63 million a year to fully staff to pay our police and fire when we have 50 more police officers and 42 more firefighters. 63 million is more than 38 million. So we certainly have to keep funding a fair amount from the general fund. And then we do need fire trucks, or police cars, and all the equipment that goes, whether it's, the body-worn cameras. I mean, they've been great in Columbia, but, you got to replace those every once in a while. There's all this equipment that comes, but I think we need to be really mindful that we want a yearly budget. And I was thinking of that coming in because I know we've listed it and I need to go back and look because I know people have different opinions as to how aggressively we're going to repay that pension fund, but I think we need to be really careful that we've got a council now that is aware of all the issues and we need to make sure we stick with those, keep, just do what we said we were going to do.
As far as the accountability of using this in the future and also being open and transparent about that, I trust the words of the chiefs. And I have great respect for both the fire chief and the police chief. And I think if anybody spent time listening to them or watching their approach to this, I think their openness and their willingness to comply with the wishes of the community is way high.
Yeah.
And I think they will hand that off to whoever replaces them. I guess what the community also wants to know is that as a city council person, the mayor, the city manager, the finance director, they will have to hand off their expectations to the next in line because it's been clear, and we've had the conversation also that it's the future. It's not the
Yeah.
now
Right.
that is the current concern or consternation. It is the future, and wanting to
Yeah.
make sure that it's done right and
Yeah.
not ignored.
Yes.
So, but again, I don't know how you felt during this campaign, but I really came to feel like the chief of the police and the chief of the fire department did a really good job of trying to
Yeah.
educate the community.
I think they did, and they were certainly out there at, any meeting that people wanted them to speak at, they were willing to speak at, whether and most of the people that showed up, had questions and concerns and some hard questions, but, a lot of folks were pretty supportive.
Two things that struck me from the press conference that was held the day after the election.
Uh-huh.
Fire Chief Brian Schaefer saying that he had hundreds of people tell him that there's no way this would pass in Columbia. And I thought I don't question that. I think that was very true. So
Mhm.
he went on forward with the request anyway, and it didn't diminish his enthusiasm for this, even though he had to face a lot of people who said this will never pass in Columbia. The other thing was when Police Chief Jill Schlude said something about proving people wrong. I think that was a comment about what she has faced in the past, probably in her own career and other things with the police department, but also her resolve to make sure this is done right in the future. She
Mhm.
just said, we'll have to prove people. I'll just have to prove to
Right.
people.
Right. And I would say the same thing of the council. I think we're supportive of it. We'll move forward with it. We will do the best we can to be transparent and make sure that the citizens know that this, we are fixing the things we need to fix, whether it's the pension plan or the new police station or getting more police officers so we don't have the mandatory overtime, and the same with the firefighters, that we do what we said we were going to do. And I think it'll work. For one thing, I think it'll work.
Yeah, my reaction to seeing that Tuesday night, those results, essentially, like, city's got its work cut out for it.
Yeah.
It's like it's got to earn this. It's
Yeah.
got to prove that citizens made the right choice
Mhm.
by delivering.
Right.
And I know, and these clips will be cut in for listeners here after we finish this conversation with Betsy. I spoke with Chief Schlude and City Manager Dr. Seewood yesterday about this too. Of what is that plan in terms of, we know all these long term things of new fire stations, rebuilding fire stations, police
Mhm.
department, etc. But what are people going to see in like the next 12 months, next 18 months?
Mhm.
Because you can't wait 3 years to show something.
No.
People aren't going to be patient enough for that.
No, but I think, like, Chief Schlute's done a really good job of recruiting. She's been recruiting, we've paid, we've given her the authority to hire more police officers. She's done that. I don't know whether she has 10 or 15 frequently in any of these academy training that she does. We're now doing this in-house, so to speak. She says, they become part of the Columbia Police Department as soon as they hit the door, where she is able to recruit because we are paying people what we should be paying them. We did finally get that pay and comp study thing done a couple of years ago, and we were able to say this is what we should be paying. And as Jill says, the problem is then MU says, well, we'll pay, 5,000 more. Oh, Fulton's like, well, we'll pay five, Jeff City says that, the county, the sheriff. So it is an ongoing issue, but I think we've got good police officers, but they're young, they're new. So we just need to keep working on that. And the same with the fire department. They're a little quieter about the whole thing, but they're going to be able to recruit. And then that will mean that we'll have decent safety in the city, hopefully.
Yeah, it's certainly one of those where the proof will be in the pudding,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And we're going to find out every year for foreseeable future. Certainly, I think the next 5 years will be the big judge.
Yeah.
How is this tax implemented? Because
Yes.
as was shared at that press conference, David mentioned, you know, they will start collecting this tax come January 1
Mhm.
of 2027. So just in about 4 months or so.
Right.
And then the city will get its first collection of that in terms of actual deposits in city accounts in March.
Right.
And from there on, we'll be able to say, hey, what are we doing with it?
What
Now
are
we
we doing
know
with it? Right.
that's the whole plan. Everything was presented,
Right.
but that's where the rubber will meet the road.
Right.
So they can't borrow against future tax earnings.
They can.
Okay. Because
Yeah.
if you wait until you have enough money to start doing some of the things. This is
Well,
postponed reaction for a couple of years then.
yeah, I would have to look at this again because there were different projections. I know we're hiring people. I mean, so that's in the works right now, and we can do that. And it takes a while to get everybody trained. So the police and fire departments are saying 4 years to get all of the staff up.
But as far
Well,
as
they could
making
do it
changes
sooner. I don't know.
immediately, they don't have to wait. I mean,
They don't have
it's
to
not
wait.
pay as you go. In other words,
No,
it's
well,
not
not
like, well, we can't do anything until we get the money for it.
no, I don't think so. If you remember, we had that $14 million settlement with CenturyTel, because people start screaming, oh, we're in the red, we're in the red. It's like, well, we got this 14 million of which we've spent, I thought 2 million, but maybe I'm wrong and it's 4 million. But there's still some money in there. So, and as people point out, we always seem to have money. When we do, we try and budget conservatively. So, if Chief Schlude or if our fire chief, Brian Schaefer, can hire people sooner, I'm thinking we'll be fine with that. I think the city manager will be fine with that. I know Jill's already talked about the new police station and how to get that started. I'm sure she'll be talking to an architect, and that always takes a few months anyway. So, I think we are moving forward. There is no plan to bond for the police station that I know of at the moment. That might change if we need to, but the finance director thought that there would be money in this account to do that. So I'm sure there will be some because we need to get them out of that building.
Yeah.
It's falling down.
Well, at that press conference,
She
Chief
showed,
Schlude was talking about how over the weekend she got a call, and so did DeCarlin, about how the parking deck was once again collapsing
falling.
in to the police
Oh, yeah.
station.
Yeah, she had some pictures of
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
I'd
The
love to see those
ceilings.
pictures, honestly, just out of curiosity, but that sounds awful and reinforces what we already knew, which is
Yeah.
that police station building headquarters
Yeah.
was, in need of repair.
I think it was a fire station for a while. I'm not sure they had horses there, but it
Yeah.
was a fire station before it became the police station.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yep.
the citizens greenlit it, however close. A pass is a pass. It is in effect. It will go and start collecting January 1. City council and staff will, and management and leadership will have to go forth and conquer and
Yeah.
deliver. And I know we'll be watching, you'll be watching, everybody will be watching to see what does this actually result in
Mhm.
over not just the next 12 months, but the next, well, forever, because the tax
Yeah.
doesn't sunset at any point.
Exactly.
What does Columbia
Exactly.
look like from a public
Yeah.
safety standpoint in 5 years?
We shall see, but I'd like to thank the citizens of Columbia for voting for it, even at that slim margin. I'd also like to thank them for their engagement. I mean, there were a lot of people that, really questioned it, came out, made us either change our website so it made more sense. I mean, we wanted questions if there were concerns. And then I think of, our most recently departed Nick Foster, who said when we put this on the ballot, he said, well, I think we should trust the citizens of Columbia to make the right choice. And I would say they did, although other people might feel differently. But he was like, we just need to ask them. What do they think? And so thank them for agreeing to tax themselves more.
Yeah. David, anything before we close out the show?
No, I'm just glad we had Betsy Peters as our guest. It's been a long time coming, and I'm glad because I respect the work she does on the council. So thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you.
And hopefully next time we have you on the show, there will be lighter subjects, not all budget and taxes.
Yeah. And
but-
maybe we won't be doing it 2 days later because the meeting
Yes.
went on for extra day.
Absolutely. Well, this has been the Como Vanguard show, the companion show to the written publication. Again, find all things Como Vanguard at comovanguard.com. I'm Nick Knoth. Dave Lile's our co-host. Thank you again, Ward 6 Councilwoman Betsy Peters, for coming on the show, and we will see you next time. Hello, listeners. The following are 2 short interviews with City Manager Dr. Seewood, followed by Chief Jill Schlude. These occurred the day after the election, following a press conference. Enjoy. So my first question is then, I feel like we all knew it was going to be close, no matter what. Well, this was more than that. This was razor thin.
Absolutely.
I think we all know the general reasons why, but I'm curious from you as city manager, what does that thin margin mean to you, and what do you take into heart and bring this forward now that it passed?
Well, it was a very thin margin. Luckily, it was a thin margin for the positive for us. But what that means is that we need to do a better job of showing our community members what we're actually doing. I think distrust in government is something that's huge. It started on the federal level, it's moved down to the state level, and now it's becoming ingrained in the local level. And so for local administrators, we have to make sure that we have processes in place that people can actually see what's being done and how it's being done. So transparency is extremely important.
So speaking of kind of, to your point, delivering for people now that this tax has passed, delivering for the citizens and the voters. Obviously, there's a lot of long-term planning that went into this. There's a lot of long-term goals associated with this: fire stations, police headquarters, growing the staff in both departments, etc. But what are some short-term goals or accomplishments you have in mind that you believe that can be delivered again on behalf of voters within the next 12 to 18 months, just to show them like, hey, we're getting things done. We're moving the needle on this. Again, knowing that a lot of it's long term, but there's always something short term. What's the low hanging fruit here?
Well, I think the hard part is with something like this, there's not a whole lot of low hanging fruit. What we do know is that we need to build a new police precinct. We need to redo some firehouses. So I think the first part is actually hiring architects to actually start that design process and being open with the community so they can see that design being done. And so they understand what's being done and how it's being done. And as we're looking at our staffing levels, making sure that we're reporting out how many people have joined the force. I mean, we balance new people coming on with people retiring out. And so just showing how that force is growing is extremely important.
So again, circling, the whole thing for me circling around the thin margin, right? The 80-ish votes that it passed by, unofficial at this moment at the time of recording. What does that mean to you, both as city manager, but also somebody who has spent your career in city management, seen things pass, seen things fail? What does that thin margin mean to you?
Well, when you look at trying to pass a public safety tax at the same time as the state is trying to eliminate income tax, which will sales tax, being able to say that it actually went through and it actually passed, I think that's remarkable. No, the chances of failure is so much greater. And so, yes, it was a very thin margin, but it passed. That means that those 50% of people that voted for it, have actually belief in what we can do. And I think it's for us to make sure that we show all our community members that public safety has been a priority for the city, and we can show exactly how we're going to utilize the funds to actually make sure that we make that priority a reality.
Any other comments you'd like to share with our listeners, people in general, now that this is passed and you all are going to be, as we've heard this morning or this afternoon rather, you're already set upon the work, right? You guys are already started the process. Any other thoughts, feedback for citizens? What do you want to share with them?
Yeah, I think, what I would say to citizens is, a lot of things that people feel like they are disconnected from their government. I would say stay engaged, stay being part of this process, follow the things that we say that we're going to do, hold us accountable. No, accountability works when people say, okay, here's what you said you're going to do. Show us that you're going to do it. And that's our plan. That's what we're going to do. And so I want people to be involved and actually see that and make sure that they understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So come to the budget meetings, come to the town halls, listen to us online, watch us, send us emails, just stay engaged.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So what is your response to this being razor thin, and what does that mean to you and going forward from here?
Well, I think, the total, I think it was right around almost like right at 30,000 people, right? And so that's still one portion of the voter turnout was amazing. I'm very thankful for that. But you still have to keep in the back of your mind, okay, not everybody came out and voted. So this doesn't have everyone's voice, but it has the people who voted, and now we're moving forward with the plan. I think, for the people, and I kind of mentioned this, I think the people that were not supportive of this, a lot of the things that we kept hearing in the 30 plus community meetings we did was just that trust factor. Like frankly, there was a lot of misunderstanding too about how municipal government works. And I totally understand because it's very complex. And if you're not in it every day, you don't understand a lot of the processes. But there was a trust piece that was brought up consistently about we think they're going to take the money and reallocate it to the parks or the homeless or all these various things. And so I found myself having to defend that a lot. And a lot of that's just based on history. Park sales tax is a great example. But, I think we have to be mindful that that is something that is in the back of the mind of a fair number of people here in the city that are concerned about it. So to me, I see that. I try to turn everything into an opportunity. That's an opportunity to prove people wrong about the city government, right? Let's show them we're going to use this money for what the voters said they wanted to use it for, which was public safety, which is police and fire only, and then do the work, right? Get the staffing fixed, get the facilities fixed, and then have a plan to move forward into the future. I think we can do that. I think we're just going to be very intentional about communication and letting people know where things stand.
So everything obviously is in the context of this being a razor thin margin. What is top of mind for you in terms of low hanging fruit that you're like, hey, CPD, my team, my department, we're going to be able to knock this out in the next 12 to 18 months to show that return on investment from voters sooner than later, knowing that there's a lot of long-term things, but what's a near-term thing?
Well, I think, the unfortunate part is because some of these problems have been admired for so long, there's not a lot of great quick fixes. So I think starting the building project in earnest right now will be helpful. And I think people will see some very immediate movement down there. Of course, there's a lot of purchasing and all those boring processes we have to go through. But I think that will actually be the first big thing people will see. We're going to start conversations again. When we talk about pay and benefits, the unions are involved in those conversations. They have to be, and rightfully so. And so I think we'll immediately start re-engaging in those conversations, because we really have to address the starting pay issue that I brought up in the community meetings, which trickles up to current pay, right? We can't just move starting pay. We have to address everybody in the middle, and as it moves forward, because pay compression is not popular, obviously. So there's a bigger project there in the wages piece, but I think that directly relates to our ability to recruit and retain people. So there's some things that are going to have to happen simultaneously. I think that one could potentially move a little bit faster, and I hope that it will, because we're starting recruiting right now for our next class. We actually have another academy that starts the end of September. So the folks that would be in the first academy of 2027, this could really be a big impact on that group.
Last question for you. As both chief and obviously a member of the police department for the last 20 plus years, this has been a long time coming, as we've discussed. And you've had this conversation a million times leading up to the vote, and now the vote happened and it passed. What does this mean to you? What does this mean to Chief Jill Schlude, with the context of you've been here so long, you've seen the good and the bad, it finally happened from your perspective? What does that mean to you?
I think sometimes you find yourself asking, like, why is this taking so long? Why is this happening now? And I think, everything aligned. Can't tell you how many hours I spent in prayer over these issues, to be perfectly honest, because it does have a huge impact on the morale and the people that work there. And my goal in this was, my time here won't be, this is not a job someone can do for 10 years. It's not and be sane at the end of it. And so I know there's a clock running for how long I can do this, just for me personally. And knowing that, you feel very, very motivated to try to make the biggest impact. And I feel like for me and this command staff and every member of the police department who went out and had conversations with neighbors and friends and, colleagues, I think this is the type of legacy. And you talk about legacy, it's not about me. 20 years from now, nobody will know who I am. That's just part of the work that we do. But they'll have a place to work that they can feel proud. They can come to work and not have to hopefully work a 16-hour shift. They can come to work and have adequate staffing and adequate equipment, and then that passes on to the people that they're serving. And so that's what it means to me. I appreciate the calls and the texts and everybody saying, hey, great job. This was a huge group effort. That in the end, the voters had to decide. So I'm very excited. I feel like my flame has been rekindled overnight, because it's hard after a while not to feel hopeless. And I could see it on my people's faces, and that's really hard to see. And the feeling in the building this morning was just a lot different, and that means the world.
Something tells me that you're not looking, or no one else on your leadership team is looking to retire next year.
I don't think so. No, I did not get that impression at all. And, a lot of people don't know, all but one of our leadership team can retire right now. So I think for me too, just as the chief, my ability to retain that team has now become much greater. And I think that's going to be huge as we try to move these major projects forward. I'm super thankful for them and everybody who just really supported us and said, and there's a lot of people like, man, the odds aren't great. And we're like, but I like being the underdogs. Now we just got to move forward and prove to people that this is going to be what we said it was going to be. And I think we'll do that.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks.
Appreciate it.